Yin Qingxuan was involved in a car accident and traveled through time, becoming an abandoned concubine in a cold palace without even a title. She also became a mother painlessly. After inheriting the memory of the original owner, Yin Qingxuan was inspired to make money and run away, raising children to rebel. No food, no fear, I have space in my hands. Without silver, one is not afraid. Grab a handful of good things. Yin Qingxuan relied on space to thrive in the palace. I was about to implement my big plan when I was stopped by a certain man. I heard you want my son to rebel. Yin Qingxuan gritted her teeth. How? No way. The man suddenly changed his face, affectionate and affectionate. Ink Flame. Chapter 1. Crossing the Time and Being a Happy Mother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The thunder is deafening, and the lightning dances like a silver snake in the sky. A torrential rain mixed with strong winds poured into the cold palace, and the wooden door, which had not been tightly closed, suddenly made a loud sound of being hit by a heavy object. The shabby little maid desperately blocked the door with her body, tears streaming down her face. The master is about to give birth, but unfortunately it will be windy and rainy. Why doesn't God open his eyes? The old lady standing in front of the bed also had red eyes. She choked up and said, "Madam, the child is about to show her head. With just one more effort, the child will be able to land." Lying in bed was a young woman with a pale face like paper, a beautiful face covered in fine beads of sweat, and a large belly very prominent. She bit her lips hard, her fingers gripping the bed frame turning white, and veins burst out on her forehead. However, in just a moment, the woman lost her strength. Mama quickly grabbed her hand and said with difficulty, "Madam, hold on a little longer. As long as you give birth to a dragon, maybe we can move out of the cold palace and the old man can return to the capital." The woman couldn't help but shed tears and choked up, saying, "My father was wronged. He is loyal to the king and loves his country. How could he collude with the enemy?" Mama crouched by the bed, tears streaming down her face. "It's unjust, but it's up to the emperor to say. As long as the empress can give birth to the child, maybe everything will be resolved easily." Upon hearing these words, the woman seemed to burst out with endless strength. At this moment, a thunderbolt fell, accompanied by a burst of baby crying. The woman didn't even see the child's face, and her wrist drooped weakly. Mama hurriedly went to see the child and didn't notice anything unusual about the woman. Upon seeing it, I couldn't help but feel overjoyed and said, "Born, Empress, you're really a dragon." "Goodbye." The woman's face turned pale and she couldn't help but be startled. "Mother, what's wrong with you?" The little girl quickly rushed over and burst into tears when she saw the woman standing still. "Master, wake up quickly, don't scare the clouds." "Master, master." Yin Qingxuan was shaken awake. "In my memory, I was on my way to the internship company when a car ran through a red light and rushed over. With a loud noise, Yin Qingxuan lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, I saw only the broken tiles and remnants of Huan, as well as a little girl who was crying with a runny nose and tears, still wearing a tattered ancient garment. "Are you?" Yin Qingxuan opened her mouth in surprise. Before she could finish asking, the little girl burst into tears of joy and said, "Master, you're awake. You scared me to death just now." "What kind of master and servant?" Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but have a headache. At this moment, a strange memory suddenly surged out. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but be surprised. She has actually traveled through. At present, this body is the legitimate daughter of General Yin of the Great Zhou State, with the same name and surname as her. A year ago, Yin Qingxuan, who was 16 years old, married into the crown prince's mansion and became the enviable crown princess. 2 months later, the late emperor passed away due to illness and the crown prince ascended to the throne. Yin Qingxuan, as the legitimate wife, was originally the perfect candidate for the empress. However, before the reward could be received, news spread that her father had colluded with his relatives and intended to rebel. The new emperor ascended the throne and granted amnesty to the world as usual, so he did not behead General Yin, but instead exiled his entire family to the northernmost city of Suihan in the Great Zhou dynasty. Yin Qingxuan, this unlucky person, was also sent to the cold palace and became the only empress of the Great Zhou dynasty who had not even abolished her title. She only brought the dowager Yunkai and her wet nurse Li Mama with her. Even more tragically, shortly after entering the cold palace, she discovered that she was pregnant. After enduring for 10 months, I finally gave birth to my child, but my life came to an end. In fact, even without the affairs of the Yin family, Yin Qingxuan's situation would not be much better. The new emperor was already unhappy with the original owner, and the only time they had sex was when she resorted to some means. Thinking of this, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel speechless. The twisted melon is indeed not sweet, nor does it quench thirst. Upon reflection, Li Mama had already knelt down with her child in her arms. She thought Yin Qingxuan was just tired just now and excitedly said, "It's great that Empress is fine. You really gave birth to a dragon son. I'll find a way to spread the news that Empress gave birth to a dragon son." Yin Qingxuan grabbed her, her voice filled with a sense of weakness. "Don't go." After only saying 2 words, she gasped heavily. The original owner's stamina has been depleted due to this child. Li Mama said in confusion, "This is great news. If the emperor and the empress dowager find out, they will definitely be very happy." Yin Qingxuan pressed on the jumping temples and frowned, saying, "Please be quiet for a while, my head is a bit sore." Li Mama quickly instructed Yunkai. "Hurry up and put down the curtain. The wind is strong today, don't let the empress suffer from it." Yunkai responded and quickly put down the tattered curtain. Yin Qingxuan was once again immersed in the memories of the original owner. The crown prince does not like the original owner, and her mother's family is also a sinner. The empress dowager has always favored her own niece as the crown princess. Now that the original owner has been in the cold palace for a year, she is almost isolated from the world. If the empress dowager's niece really marries the new emperor, she will definitely not be able to accommodate herself. She currently has no power, no money, no connections, and no capital to protect her life. It's really unsafe for her to go out rashly. Moreover, this child was exchanged for her life by the original owner, and everything she says must be protected for her. While contemplating what to do in the future, an ethereal voice suddenly came to my mind and said, "The space has perfectly integrated with the host. The reward is a glance at Ling Quan, and there is a beginner point mall. Please develop and use it yourself." With the amazing kung fu, the person has appeared in a strange space. There is a clear spring on the right, and in front of it is a piece of farmland. In front of the farmland is a huge house. Upon entering, it was indeed a shopping mall, with a dazzling array of food and amenities. Yin Qingxuan instinctively touched her favorite jasmine tea, but was bounced back by an invisible light curtain. The previous voice prompt said, "1 point can be redeemed." Surprisingly, I still need points. How did I get points? Yin Qingxuan asked twice but no one answered, as if her voice only knew how to introduce, not how to converse. She tried something else but couldn't get it, so she left the room in frustration. With just a glance, I suddenly noticed a very modern digital screen standing on the right side of the supermarket, with a row of large characters scrolling on it. Novice Task 1. Plant any plant and earn 10 points. Yin Qingxuan was suddenly excited. Since it was any plant, it meant everything was fine. I searched around but found that the space was very clean and there were no mission plants, so I had to leave first. Li Mama lifted the curtain and hugged the child, saying, "Madam, the prince is crying so hard. He must be hungry. Please feed him some milk quickly." Chapter 2. The Goddess is Strange. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yin Qingxuan's face turned red for a moment. She didn't even have a boyfriend, and suddenly asked her to breastfeed her child, feeling a bit uncomfortable in her heart. But when I saw the baby's crying face turn red, I couldn't bear it anymore. She carefully picked up the child, fearing that it might be damaged, but the next second she felt embarrassed as the original owner had no milk. The little baby took a bite and didn't eat anything. Suddenly, he clenched his little fist and started crying. His 2 little feet kicked back and forth, as if venting his dissatisfaction. Li Mama quickly brought the child over and comforted her, saying urgently, "What should we do? The Empress has no milk, and we adults can starve for a few meals without any worries. The prince is so young, how can he survive?" The little baby cried uncontrollably, and Yin Qingxuan was also a bit anxious. Thinking of the point's task in the space, she immediately shouted, "Yun Kai, go outside and pull out a grass for me." Yun Kai was stunned for a moment. "Master, don't be so anxious and dizzy. What's the use of pulling grass?" The child's crying was so loud that Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel flustered, and her voice grew louder. "Go quickly." Yun Kai saw that his master was in a hurry, and immediately ran to the door in the rain. The eaves were covered with dry grass, and he reached out and pulled out a handful. Yin Qingxuan took the grass and said to the 2, "You guys go out first, I'll come up with a solution." Li Mama opened her mouth, closed it again, and carried the child and the clouds to the outer room. Yin Qingxuan quickly entered the space and planted the grass on her hand into the soil next to the Lingquan. 3 seconds later, the sound rang out again. The host successfully planted plants and received a 10-point reward. Yin Qingxuan was excited for a moment and immediately ran into the mall, taking a bag of milk powder. This time, the system did not pop up, but received a prompt indicating whether to redeem. 1 bag of milk powder earns 2 points. Yin Qingxuan looked at the bottle next to her again, which was also a 2-point, not too expensive, so she just changed it. "I used 3 points to exchange for 2 packs of noodles and 1 pack of salt. The remaining 3 points left me unsure of what to exchange for." Yin Qingxuan walked around the supermarket and suddenly found over 20 packets of seeds in a small corner, including cucumbers, tomatoes, chili peppers, beans, wheat, rice, and so on. Basically, there were all the common things. Taking it for a moment, each one earned a point, and Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel a little excited. She exchanged the remaining 3 points for her favorite cucumbers, tomatoes, and wheat. With these, even if you can't earn points, you can still eat fresh vegetables and flour. When she went out, she glanced at the sign again, and the task above had indeed been updated. Novice Task 2. Successfully harvest the fruits of plants and earn 100 points. Thinking of the crying child outside, Yin Qingxuan temporarily put aside her focus on the research task and quickly left the space. The child was still crying as expected. Yin Qingxuan lifted the curtain and shouted towards the clouds, "Go boil a pot of hot water and make some milk for the child to drink." The clouds immediately ran in. "Master, where is milk?" Yin Qingxuan's face darkened. "Don't ask, go boil the water quickly." It was the first time Yun Kai had seen such a serious expression, and he couldn't help but feel a little scared. He responded and ran out. In no time, a pot of water was brought in. Yin Qingxuan was not in the mood to care about Yun Kai's thoughts. She opened the milk powder bag and filled it with 2 spoons. After rinsing it with hot water, she asked Yun Kai to take it outside to cool down before feeding it to the child. She didn't know if 2 spoons were enough. Anyway, when her little nephew was just born, her sister-in-law fed him like this. Yun Kai looked at the milk powder and the strange-looking bottle in surprise, and his shock was indescribable. But there was nothing more important than the prince. Yun Kai quickly poured some cold water, warmed the milk powder, and gave it to Li Mama. Seeing the bottle, Grandma Li was also surprised. "What is this thing? Where did you get it?" Yun Kai didn't know how to explain it, so he had to tell the truth. The master gave it to me, but I'm not sure. The master said there's milk inside. Li Mama, please feed the little prince first. Li Mama immediately handed the pacifier to the child's hand, and the little one couldn't wait. He opened his mouth and started sucking desperately. Yin Qingxuan inside also breathed a sigh of relief and finally stopped crying. As soon as the person relaxed, their stomach immediately started growling. Thinking of the master and servants eating spoiled food for several days in a row, they couldn't help but curse inwardly. As expected, the palace was filled with things with high ambitions but low abilities. Fortunately, there are many delicious things in the supermarket. As long as you can earn points, you can buy ordinary things. For now, cook some noodles to fill your stomach. At this point, the rain has stopped. Come quickly, go also quickly. In an instant, the sky became clear for thousands of miles. Jinluan Hall. On the high dragon chair sat a handsome man in a yellow robe. He wore an imperial crown on his head, a jade belt around his waist, and a majestic 5-clawed golden dragon embroidered with golden threads on his front, highlighting his heroic appearance and imposing demeanor. This person is the new emperor of the state of Zhou, Knight Jingyu. The capital has been experiencing years of severe drought, and only recently came a shower of rain. What's even more strange is that when the rain came, there were no dark clouds, and the sky seemed to have been cut open. Suddenly, a basin of water came down. It's just a cup of tea, and the clouds are calm and the wind is clear. All the courtiers looked out of the hall and whispered softly. This rain has come so strangely. Citizen Jian, what is your opinion on this rain? A deep voice echoed from the dragon chair, echoing in the grand hall. A man walked out of the courtiers and knelt down, pretending to be pleasantly surprised, saying, Your Majesty, this is a sign of auspiciousness. There must be a noble woman among the ladies who brought this precious rain. If yin and yang can be reconciled, my great Zhou will surely turn misfortune into auspiciousness, and the weather will be smooth. Knight Jingyu's eyes flickered with a stern expression and he said coldly, Who taught you to say that? Citizen Jian was immediately startled and said, No one told me, it was calculated by me. Knight Jinyu squinted her eyes and leaned slightly. With a stern tone, he said, I said your calculations were wrong. Go outside the noon gate and give me a good calculation. If you can't come up with a good result, don't take your head. Immediately, a guard pulled out the heavenly supervisor. Knight Jingyu's gaze swept around the courtiers and said coldly, A few beautiful women have stirred up so much of your thoughts, but you haven't seen starving people everywhere and refugees flooding the capital. Minister of Works, I ordered you to dig wells and irrigate the fields. Why hasn't there been any effect so far? The Minister of Works quickly knelt down and said with a trembling voice, I have ordered people to go to various places to supervise, but it will take time to dig wells. Please rest assured, Emperor. Knight Jinyu snorted coldly, and her voice sank a bit. I only give you 3 months' time. If you can't do it, please go back to your hometown on your own. The Minister of Works suddenly burst into sweat. Yes, I comply with the order. Knight Jinyu showed off his robe and stood up. A wave of imperial authority spread out from around the body, causing the courtiers to feel suffocated. They all looked at their toes, not daring to breathe a single breath. Looking down at the officials at night, you said quietly. To save the country and the people, we should start from the imperial court. From today on, officials of all sizes are only allowed to eat 2 meals, as is the case in the palace. The grain saved is used to give kanji to the people in turn on the first 15 days of every month. If anyone dares to open a small kitchen privately, he will be blamed for 50 times. The whole family will fall back from the imperial court with the same sin. As soon as the imperial decree was issued, the palace immediately became chaotic. Several beautiful women who were preparing to cook a small kitchen were quickly put out, and eunuchs and maids also hurriedly hid the dim sum given by the master. Even the cold palace was affected, and the original 2 spoiled meals were directly changed to 1. Fortunately, Yin Qingxuan had foresight and exchanged 2 pounds of hanging noodles. She asked Yun Kai to boil water and add some salt inside. Although the taste was lacking, it was much stronger than something rotten. Yun Kai and Li Mama had never seen noodles before and couldn't help but wolf them down. After finishing his meal, Yun Kai couldn't help but ask, "Master, where did you get such delicious food?" Yin Qingxuan couldn't answer, so she stiffened her face. "Don't ask too many questions. Without my instructions in the future, don't enter the inner room casually. If the child cries, give him milk powder." After speaking, he put down the curtain. Yun Kai and Li Mama exchanged a glance, both feeling that the Empress was strange. Chapter 3. Immortal Spring. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The previous Empress always spoke softly and gently, while the current master seemed somewhat indifferent. What puzzled them the most was where all these strange things were brought about. Yin Qingxuan also had a big head and never expected the plot in the novel to happen to her. She herself is still a big baby who hasn't graduated from college. Now she not only has to raise a child, but also needs to survive in the cold palace. This question is too difficult. Fortunately, the heavens brought her a legendary golden finger, and with a movement of her mind, she had already entered the space. Yin Qingxuan spent some effort digging a few small pits and planted some wheat, cucumbers, and tomatoes. At this moment, a prompt suddenly appeared in front of her. Whether to use Lingquan for watering. Don't think too much about this. I immediately chose it, and the water from the Lingquan suddenly flew out and poured it accurately on the grain. Then, a scene that surprised Yin Qingxuan happened. The seeds planted just now have grown visibly to the naked eye, and in the blink of an eye, they are all green. It's truly a spiritual spring. Yin Qingxuan was overjoyed for a moment, quickly planted some more, and processed them the same way, choosing Lingquan for watering. After tossing around for 2 hours, she was too tired to move, so she grabbed a handful of spring water and drank it, feeling cool all over her body and instantly full of strength. Does the spiritual spring of emotions have a healing function? Yin Qingxuan looked at the spring water and felt even more that the space was against the sky. To avoid being noticed, she didn't dare to stay too long. After being busy for a while, she withdrew from the space. Yun Kai and Li Mama were playing with their children in the outer room, and when they heard their voices, Yin Qingxuan felt relieved. Suddenly, I thought of those springs again. If they were given to Li Mama Yun Kai and her children to drink, would it also help them strengthen their bodies? I immediately shouted, "Yun Kai, please find a basin that can hold things." Opening her mouth, Yin Qingxuan realized that she had gained a lot of qi. Yun Kai let out a sigh and took a white porcelain basin. "Master, what are you doing?" Faced with this curious little girl like a baby, Yin Qingxuan felt it was necessary to explain, otherwise she wouldn't be able to bring out anything in the future. He whispered, "Last night before my child was born, I met an old immortal who gave me a Qingquan bag that only I could use myself. There was a lot of delicious food inside, and there was also a mouthful of Xinxian spring. I will make some Xinxian spring for you and Li Mama to drink now." Yun Kai opened her mouth in surprise, her eyes almost falling out. "Master, is this true?" "Of course, otherwise where did you get the noodles you were eating?" Yin Qingxuan spoke confidently, then lowered her voice and said, "Only the 3 of us know about this matter. If someone else listens to it, it will definitely cause us great harm, you know." Yun Kai quickly nodded and cautiously said, "I understand." Seeing the little girl believe so quickly, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but curl her lips. It was indeed easy for ancient people to persuade. Immediately, he said seriously, "Then go out and I'll go and taste the spring water for you." Yin Qingxuan pushed away the clouds and entered space again. Looking at the persimmons and cucumbers, they all bloomed. "At this speed, we can harvest tomorrow." Thinking of not having to eat spoiled food and vegetables, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel a burst of joy. She walked briskly to the spring and filled a basin of water. I accidentally saw my face in the water and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The original owner is really beautiful, with typical willow leaf arched eyebrows, melon seed face, and a pair of sparkling eyes that seem to be able to speak. Unfortunately, such a stunning woman has to rely on means to have sex with that dog man. It's really hard to imagine. Thinking that this child was born through countless hardships by the original owner, it's not cheap to say anything about that dog emperor. Why not take the space and go to Sui Han City to find the father of the original owner, and let the family get rich and live a good life? When they have free time, it's better to find a handsome guy than to engage in intrigue in this palace. She doesn't mind living those days of snatching men from women. Thinking of this, Yin Qingxuan suddenly felt that she had a goal in life. Taking the water outdoors, he said to Yun Kai and Li Mama, "This is the Immortal Spring. You should also drink some." Li Mama was startled and quickly said, "Kai Yun, why don't you come next? The Empress is weak, how could she carry such a heavy thing?" Yin Qingxuan smiled nonchalantly. "It's okay, I've recovered from drinking the divine Immortal Spring. You guys should give it a try." Li Mama has already heard Kai Yun say it, but her heart is still half believing. Is there really a fairy in this world? If there really is, why didn't they come out early? They stayed in the cold palace for a year, isn't it not hard enough? Kai Yun has scooped up a cup with a cup, and after taking a sip, she only feels sweet and refreshing. Her limbs are smooth, and her fatigue has really been swept away. Excitedly, he said, "It's true, Mammy, you should also try it." Li Mama also took a few sips and was momentarily taken aback. Years of presbyopia, surprisingly no longer blurred, there are no ghosting when looking at things, and the leg that just hurt inexplicably no longer hurts. The whole person seems to be several years younger. She tentatively took a step and exclaimed in surprise, "It's really true that the Empress has been able to receive this kind of happiness. It's really amazing that heaven cannot stop us from the Yin family." After finishing speaking, she knelt down with a thud and said excitedly, "Madam, if the Empress Dowager gets this good thing, she will definitely treat her well. Besides, we still have a dragon. Is this a good opportunity for us to leave the cold palace?" Yin Qingxuan's face darkened and she said, "Don't say such things anymore. Human hearts are the most greedy. If you give her a sip of water, she still wants a second sip of water. If I don't give it, she will not only be grateful for the previous kindness, but also hold a grudge. Besides, we have been in the cold palace for more than a year and have no idea about the situation outside. Moreover, my mother's family is also a criminal. If someone wants to harm us, how should we protect ourselves? Why does the Emperor have sex with me? You all know, do you think he will protect me because of a child?" These words made Li Mama break into a cold sweat. She was all focused on thinking that the Empress could make a comeback so that the master could return to the capital, but she never expected so much. If we go out rashly now, it's really difficult to turn things around, and even the prince may not be able to be saved. Thinking about the Emperor's attitude towards the Empress, he couldn't help but kowtow repeatedly. "Empress, please forgive me." It was the old servant's careless thinking that almost caused harm to Empress. Yin Qingxuan knew that the wet nurse really cared for her and was also devoted to the Yin family, so she reached out and pulled her up. "Although we are masters and servants, we still have feelings for our mother and daughter. We don't need to perform this great gift in the future, and don't think about anything else. I have my own ideas on how to do it." Seeing the Empress's gaze fixed, Li Mama couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. This little girl who grew up by herself seems to have grown up all of a sudden. Chapter 4. Dog Eggs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Mama was deeply moved in her heart and bowed, saying, "I know, but should we give the little prince a name?" Thinking of that heartless and unjust man, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel a chill in her teeth. Just call it dog egg, it's easy to raise a lowly reputation. The cloud covered its mouth and burst out laughing. Master, there's no one by that name. Li Mama also grinned, this name is too low on the stage. Yin Qingxuan has already returned to her room. Anyway, she is the seed of that man and is waiting to leave the palace before giving her child a good name. She doesn't want to waste that thought right now. Returning to the room, Yin Qingxuan entered the space again, drank some spiritual spring water, and started farming again. The land in the space was not large, about 20 ridges, each with a maximum length of 20 meters. Yin Qingxuan planted 2 rows of vegetables, and the rest were all planted with wheat. When it came out, it was already completely dark. Yin Qingxuan took a look outside, and both Li Mama and Yun Kai were already asleep. Dog Egg is also quite honest, sleeping soundly with his small eyes closed. Since using Lingquan water to make milk powder, the changes in puppy eggs have also been significant. When Yin Qingxuan first saw him, his small face was still wrinkled. Now, that small face is as smooth as jade, white, tender, and round. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but sigh. If it weren't for God giving her a space, it would really be difficult to support such a young child. After thinking about it, she came to the door and released her hand. When she stood up, she suddenly heard a rustling sound coming from the grass on the right side. She immediately dared to ask, "Who?" As soon as the words fell, a white object jumped out of the grass. Yin Qingxuan was suddenly knocked down by the object, which frightened her and made her scream. Li Mama and Kaiyun heard the sound and quickly ran out with lanterns in hand. With the dim light, Yin Qingxuan suddenly saw a big, snow-white dog. The dog looked a bit like modern golden fur, but its physique was much larger, like a foal. No wonder one paw pushed Yin Qingxuan to the ground. This big dog seemed harmless, licking its hands and wagging its tail at Yin Qingxuan. Yun Kai couldn't help but exclaim, This is not the crown prince, oh no, this is the emperor's white snow. Why did you come to the cold palace?" Upon hearing Yun Kai's words, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but have some impressions. That bastard surnamed Yi seems to have such a big dog. It is said that he found it during his campaign against Jiangu Kingdom and then brought it back to the capital. No wonder this dog knows itself. Yin Qingxuan herself also quite likes dogs and reached out to touch their huge heads. The dog suddenly became happy again, with both paws grabbing Yin Qingxuan's shoulder and vigorously rubbing against her. Yin Qingxuan couldn't bear its weight and forcefully pushed the dog away. Li Mama on the side sighed and said, "I didn't expect Bai Shui to know the Empress, and the Empress didn't give it a free meal." Yun Kai looked puzzled. The walls of this cold palace are so high that Snow White cannot jump in. Where did it come from? Yin Qingxuan's spiritual light flashed. Is there a dog hole in this cold palace? Immediately, the dry grass from the dog drill was peeled off, and there was indeed a big hole. Outside the hole grew a huge ancient tree, and there were also many half-human tall flowers and plants next to it. It was difficult to see unless you walked around behind the tree. This discovery immediately excited Yin Qingxuan. Does it mean they can escape from the cold palace and leave this ghost place? No, you can't be too impulsive. There are countless guards in the palace, and if you want to leave, you must plan carefully. On the other side, dozens of eunuchs were running around looking for dogs. Everyone knows that the emperor is very strict with Snow White. If he loses it, he will be beheaded. The night scene of you sitting on the dragon chase was also cold with phoenix eyes and a gloomy handsome face. During these days, there was nothing that could comfort him. The drought in the world was difficult to solve, and Jiang Wugua was also on the verge of action. The general Sent had suffered several defeats in a row, humiliating the state of Zhou. Thinking about the constant concern of the courtiers for the harem, Yi Jingyu felt even more frustrated. The only thing that can make him feel better now is Bai Shui. When he arrived at the side hall where Bai Shui lived, he found that this little bastard had gone somewhere. Seeing the emperor's face tense, the eunuchs were even more frightened and shouted loudly, "Master Bai Shui, come out quickly." "White Snow Master, where are you?" Bai Shui's ears were sharp, and when she heard someone call her name, she immediately crawled out of the cave and started barking towards the distance. The night was silent, and a few dog barks spread far away. A young eunuch exclaimed in surprise, "Your Majesty, it seems that Master Bai Shui is over there." Knight Jingyu listened carefully and indeed heard the dog barking. He immediately ordered, "Go and take a look." Yin Qingxuan also heard the footsteps and couldn't help but be startled. She pushed the dogs but hard. "You go quickly, don't expose this place, otherwise I won't play with you." Bai Shui seemed to understand Yin Qingxuan's words and ran away with a loud bang. Then someone exclaimed joyfully, "Your Majesty, you are truly the Snow White Lord." For a moment, a deep voice sounded outside the palace wall, with a hint of indulgence. "Where did you go in the middle of the night? Don't run around next time." Li Mama couldn't help but excitedly clench her fist. "Emperor, Emperor. The Emperor is now outside the wall." If the Empress shouts now, it's impossible to say that Yin Qingxuan naturally knew Li Mama's feelings and shook her head. In an instant, the sound of footsteps faded away, and the night returned to tranquility. Yin Qingxuan pulled Li Mama into the room. In a calm voice, he said, "That man doesn't belong to me. Let the wet nurse put an end to this idea in the future. I will find a way to take you out of the palace and find my father. This kind of emperor who knows right from wrong, whether it's not guaranteed or not." Yun Kai looked at Yin Qingxuan with a surprised expression on his face. "Going out of the palace? Master, can we?" Yin Qingxuan pointed to the dog hole. "That's just an opportunity. The cold palace has been in disrepair for a long time, and no one will pay attention to it. As long as we plan properly, maybe we can leave." After a moment of silence, Li Mama said helplessly, "Yes, my lord has been sent to the border for the southern and northern expeditions of the Great Zhou Kingdom, leaving him with scars all over his body. It's hard not to feel cold. However, if we want to leave, it's not a small matter. We need to be well prepared in all aspects. Otherwise, we won't be able to leave just by passing the palace gate." Yin Qingxuan hummed and said, "This is not something that can be completed in a hurry. We have been living in the cold palace for a year, and it's not short of this time. We have to wait for our child to have a month before we can talk about it." As soon as the child was mentioned, Dog Egg burst into tears. Yin Qingxuan was startled and quickly said, "Go and milk him, don't be hurt." At this moment, Knight Jingyu, who was being chased by Long, was playing with Bai Shui when she suddenly heard a baby cry and couldn't help but raise her hand. The eunuch suddenly stopped and respectfully asked, "What orders does the emperor have?" Knight Jingyu listened for a moment, but the voice disappeared again. "I thought it was my own hallucination," and said in a low voice, "Come back." Chapter 5. Unexpected Gains. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The little dog Egg fell silent after eating the milk powder. Two little hands happily waved back and forth, and their pink feet kicked and kicked. As Yin Qingxuan watched the little one with his eyes closed and trying to suck on his pacifier, she couldn't help but marvel at the magic of life. Even such a small thing knows that it must work hard to live. As his cheap old lady, I must work even harder. At the same time, I also feel that this little guy is very attractive and rare, much more fun than his little nephew who cries when he opens his mouth. She wanted to hug the child, but didn't dare to. She always felt that the child's small arms and legs were too fragile, so let's wait for a bigger one before we talk. Returning to the room, Yin Qingxuan pondered again. If you want to leave the palace, you need to have money to connect various relationships and channels, but now they don't have any money, which is a big problem. When entering the cold palace, it was too sudden. The original owner didn't have time to bring anything, not even clothes to change and wash, let alone embroidery and other things. If there was a way to exchange money, he wouldn't have eaten spoiled food all at once. The things she planted in the space were not available in this dynasty, so it would be doubted if she took them out, and it was not convenient to store them. Yin Qingxuan thought about it, and finally thought of two things that could be sold and kept, namely, mirrors and perfume. There are many wealthy people in the capital, and these things are bound to be very popular. Yin Qingxuan felt more and more feasible as she thought about it. With her dream of leaving the palace, she slept until she naturally woke up. Open your eyes, it's already dawn. Thinking of yesterday's fruit, Yin Qingxuan quickly entered the space. As expected, everything has matured. Looking at the red tomatoes and the bent ears of wheat, Yin Qingxuan suddenly felt a sense of joy in a bountiful harvest. She reached out to pick a tomato and immediately heard the ethereal prompt sound. Successfully harvest the fruit and reward 100 points. Yin Qingxuan was immediately excited and picked the cucumber again, but did not receive any points prompt. Yin Qingxuan was somewhat disappointed, but 100 points was enough for her to buy a lot of things. As they continued to pick, the voice asked, "Do you want to use points for spatial picking? You need to exchange 10 points." Yin Qingxuan didn't expect such a service, so she immediately chose it. If she picked so many ridges herself, it would take some time. The price is still reasonable. Just as I finished selecting, a small pile of tomatoes and cucumbers appeared in front of me, and the wheat was neatly piled aside, even helping to turn over the ground. At this moment, the voice asked again, "Do you want to use space to grind flour? You can exchange 10 points." Yin Qingxuan's eyes widened in surprise, as the space was too intimate. Without hesitation, she chose to agree, and the next second the wheat ears turned into flour. The space was also very considerate and she packed them in bags, which were over 30 bags. Yin Qingxuan was extremely excited, not expecting flour to be eaten so soon. In order to avoid being discovered by outsiders with so many things, Yin Qingxuan decided to change to a steel basin for dressing, and also had to change to some sanitary napkins. The original owner had just finished production, and there was a lot of lochia and sweat on his body, so he needed to take a shower. Yin Qingxuan first changed a plastic bathtub and a small bottle of shower gel, took a bath with the spirit spring, dried her body, and suddenly felt refreshed, light as a swallow, and her skin was more delicate and white than before. As he sighed, he suddenly heard the space say, "The host has successfully achieved a transformation achievement and is rewarded with 50 points. Old Swan, surprisingly, there was an unexpected harvest. It seems that this space is worth exploring well. At present, we need to sacrifice to the Five Organs Temple first, and we can study it when we have time." Yin Qingxuan simply tidied up and then entered the mall. "I exchanged a piece of pork with 5 flowers, a small mirror with 5 iron shells and 5 small bottles of perfume, and the rest was exchanged for oil, salt, soy sauce and vinegar. At last, there were 82 points left, and the price was not bad." Yin Qingxuan poured out these things in 2 separate trips. As soon as she lifted the curtain, she heard Yun Kai exclaim, "The imperial dining room is too shameful. I've been waiting all morning and haven't seen anyone delivering food. Isn't this a meal you don't want to give us anymore?" Li Mama whispered, "All right, don't you still have the noodles given by the Empress? You go cook the noodles and we'll have some noodle soup together." The sound of the clouds suddenly quieted down. "I just feel angry. I'll go cook noodles now. As long as the host is full, I won't be hungry." Upon hearing that both of them were thinking so much about themselves, Yin Qingxuan was deeply moved. It is not easy to support each other in the cold palace to this day. "Yun Kai, come in, let's have meat today." Yun Kai was stunned for a moment. "Master, are you calling me?" She walked quickly into the bedroom and saw a pile of things on the bed, so surprised that she couldn't close her mouth. "Is this all given to us by the gods?" Yin Qingxuan pursed her lips and smiled. Yeah, the gods pitied us and gave us a piece of meat. Let's go cook it and put all these seasonings on. Yun Kai swallowed his saliva excitedly, then looked up and was surprised again. Master, why are you so good? Looking again. Yin Qingxuan in front of her was like a delicate porcelain doll, with white and tender skin that could be easily broken by a blow. Her eyelashes were also quite thick, like 2 small brushes. The fine eyelashes formed a black line on the eyelids, making her pupils appear black and bright, even more beautiful than those Wang Sungui who had applied makeup. Yin Qingxuan had already noticed her changes, undoubtedly thanks to Lingquan. Don't worry about that, let's improve the food first. As she spoke, Mama Li walked in. Seeing Yin Qingxuan's changes was also a surprise, but after all, she was old and couldn't ask everything like a cloud, but her tone couldn't conceal her excitement. It's beautiful, it's beautiful. Yun Kai, why are you still waiting? Hurry up and go. The Empress is giving birth and needs to take good care of herself. Hey! Yun Kai responded and ran out with meat and seasoning. Yin Qingxuan asked Li Mama to wash the cucumbers and tomatoes again. Tomatoes can be cold mixed with sugar, and cucumbers can also be stir-fried with meat. Yin Qingxuan personally baked a few cakes with white flour. Her parents left early and have been living with her grandmother since childhood, so this kind of work is not a problem at all. Li Mama and Yun Kai wanted to help, but they couldn't help. Neither of them knew how to make noodles, so they had to worry. An hour later, the pancake was cooked and the meat in the cloud was almost cooked. As soon as the pot was cooked, a long-lost scent of meat was immediately smelled. Master, the meat smells so delicious. Yun Kai smiled and revealed her little tiger teeth. She couldn't remember what meat tasted like. Li Mama couldn't help but feel a tinge in her eyes as she looked at the brightly colored meat. Yin Qingxuan had already picked up her chopsticks and said with a smile, if it's fragrant, hurry up and eat it. In the future, let's strive to have meat every day. She picked up a piece of meat and was about to deliver it into her mouth. A white shadow suddenly pounced from a distance and snatched away the meat in one bite. Chapter 6. Rebellion in Raising Children. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yun Kai suddenly became anxious and stood up, saying, Bai Shui, why are you here again? You can't steal the master's meat. Looking at Bai Shui chewing meat with her big mouth open, Yin Qingxuan was speechless. This dog has a sharp nose. Just eat it, we still have so much meat. The clouds immediately blocked the pot to prevent snow from jumping up and grabbing it. Smelling the meat, Bai Shui hurriedly turned around and couldn't help but sit on the ground, kowtowing to Yin Qingxuan with her 2 paws. Yin Qingxuan picked up another piece for it and cursed with a smile, you bastard, your master has nothing to do with him, but he wants to come to us to grab food. Yun Kai said vaguely while eating the meat, it must be that the meat from the emperor is not as fragrant as ours. Master, this is too delicious, and the pancakes are also delicious. Watching the little girl smile with curved eyebrows and eyes, Yin Qingxuan was in a good mood. Let's eat delicious food every day in the future. The 3 of them were swept away by the wind, leaving only a pot of meat to eat. Bai Shui also picked up many benefits on the side and let out a whimper of joy. Dogs are quite rare, but whenever she thinks of their ruthless master, Yin Qingxuan feels uncomfortable. She bent down and drew a fire stick that extinguished the fire, grabbed Bai Shui, drew 2 curved thick eyebrows, and also drew a clown-like big mouth and 2 black faces. It is said that the dog surnamed Yi loves his life, and if he sees someone causing such harm to his dog, he will definitely go mad with anger. After imagining his furious appearance for a moment, Yin Qingxuan felt a burst of relief. Bai Shui thought Yin Qingxuan was playing with it, her tail wagging and flapping, sweeping away the circle of ash by the pot. Go ahead and come back tomorrow to play. After finishing the painting, Yin Qingxuan patted its big head. Bai Shui suddenly jumped out with joy. The clouds are a bit nervous. Master, the emperor wouldn't have guessed it was you who painted it, would he? No, he forgot about me and went there long ago. It's been a year now. If that dog man still remembers his original owner, how could he send someone over to take a look? Even if he doesn't release her from the cold palace, he has to ask about her food. Now that he doesn't even have any spoiled food, it means he has already given up his original owner. Thinking of this, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel a wave of resentment. If she can really leave the palace, she must raise the child, and then let him rebel and kill this bastard emperor to avenge the original owner. That's right, that's it. Yin Qingxuan waved her fist and stood up from the stool with one leg missing. Master, please slow down. You're still in confinement. The clouds quickly helped her. It's okay. Yin Qingxuan felt quite well, without any weakness during confinement. Immediately turned to the clouds. Are there any guards watching outside the cold palace? Yun Kai nodded. There are 2 brothers, named Wang Dao and Wang Erwu. Yin Qingxuan asked again, how are they? Yun Kai thought for a moment and said, it should be okay, I haven't had much contact with them either. Then you can get in touch with them. I have some things for them to sell, and I only need 100 taels of silver for each one. If I sell more, it will be theirs. Yin Qingxuan entered the room with a robe in hand. Yun Kai followed closely behind her and asked in surprise, Master, did I hear you right? What can sell for 100 taels? Yin Qingxuan opened the curtain and took out the mirror and perfume. These the clouds were once again a great surprise. What is this? Is it a mirror? It's so clear when looking at people. Yin Qingxuan was used to the way she didn't see, nodded and said, it's the mirror and perfume. She opened the bottle cap of the bead perfume and wiped it on the back of the cloud's hand. Suddenly, a strong fragrance spread in the space. The cloud sniffed hard. It's so fragrant, even more fragrant than powder. Yin Qingxuan rolled her eyes and said, what is fragrant powder? It's high-tech from the 20th century. Li Mama also walked in, and Yin Qingxuan also wiped her a little. But Mammy Li stared at the pearlescent bottle of perfume and said excitedly, the shining glass bottle alone can be worth 100 taels. Really, Yin Qingxuan was a bit incredulous, it seemed like she was selling less than 100 taels. Forget it, just 102 pieces. We need to make money as soon as possible. If the Wang brothers can keep their mouths shut, everyone will have money to take in the future. The clouds are also a bit excited. Okay, then I'll go talk about it now. Let me go. Li Mama stopped the clouds and bowed to Yin Qingxuan. Empress, I suggest that you don't give them too much at once. You should let them taste some sweetness first, and then you can do your best to sell it to us in the future. Yin Qingxuan also makes sense when she thinks about it. This thing is exchanged for points. If it is kidnapped, who should she go to? Just nodded. Okay, I'll give them 2 of each, and it's best to sell them outside the palace to avoid being eye-catching. I know now. Mammy Li took the perfume and the mirror and went to the palace. Imperial study. Knight Xinyu was watching the memorial, his handsome face tense. The recent changes have been all the same, either asking him to establish a queen or giving him the chance to choose a concubine as soon as possible. There is a famine everywhere, and these old things cannot be seen, but they just stare at his backyard. These bastards, damn it. After reading more than 10 folds in a row, all of them were like this. Yi Jingyu couldn't help but throw the folds to the ground in anger. The 2 eunuchs quickly lowered their heads, afraid to show any signs of grandeur. But with a flash of white shadow, a fluffy object rushed towards him. Yi Jingyu reached out to embrace Bai Shui, but was brushed against with a black hand. Looking at the 2 thick black eyebrows on Bai Shui's eyes and the dark face, he couldn't help but angrily say, "You're reckless. Who ate the bear heart leopard gallbladder and painted Bai Shui like this?" The two eunuchs immediately knelt down in fear. The emperor, calm down. Bai Shui still happily pounced on him, as if waiting for Yi Jingyu's praise. A moon-white robe was messed up by the white snow, and Night Jingyu couldn't help but become even more angry. He raised his hand and threw the white snow to the ground. Take it to clean immediately. Yes. The two eunuchs quickly caught Bai Shui and forcibly carried it away. Old eunuch Li Difu had already run in with a new robe in his arms. Trembling, he said, "Your Majesty, calm down. Perhaps some young lady is not sensible and has played with Bai Shui too much." Night Jingyu reached out and pulled off her robe, her eyes as if they were frozen with ice. "Go investigate, whoever it is, the staff will be 50 and they will never be allowed to enter the palace." He glanced at the robe in Li Difu's hand and said in a deep voice, "Go and get my military uniform." Li Difu's head couldn't help but sweat. The emperor is going to Chongwu Hall again, and the accompanying guards will suffer again at this moment. The news of Bai Shui being harmed has spread, and everyone in the harem is in danger. But everyone was also puzzled. Bai Shui never interacts with these ladies. Who is so bold and daring to touch it? Chapter 7. The Road to Wealth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everyone knows that Night Jingyu likes this dog, and the newly entered ladies in the palace naturally put their hearts into it in order to compete for favor. However, no matter what they use to lure Snow White, the dog never gets close to them. Because Bai Shui had a huge body, they dared not get too close, afraid of being bitten. Unexpectedly, someone dared to draw on its face. If it were really a lady who did it, she would be dead. Many people are waiting to see a good show. This also includes the Empress Dowager's niece, Lu Jingxian. She has now been granted the title of Xianfei. Although she has never been favored by Night Jingyu, in this palace full of beautiful women, she is still a unique and prominent figure, and is the object of flattery among the ladies. Upon hearing this news, Lu Jingxian couldn't help but sneer. Who would be so inconspicuous as to dare to waste Snow White like this? I really thought it would catch the emperor's attention. It's just a dream. Cui Zhu, who pounded his legs, said quickly, "Yes, the emperor has already issued an order. If we catch this person with a staff, we will be punished 50 times, and we will have to drive him out of the palace gate." Lu Jingxian eats a dim sum and leans comfortably on the soft pillow. She is a bit jealous and says, "It's hard for outsiders to get close to Snow White at ordinary times. Even if our palace is close to it, it will show its teeth with our palace. Why is it suddenly allowed to wear white cloth?" Cui Zhu immediately said, "It must be that the other party used some means. Don't be fooled by these pretty girls who seem obedient on the surface, they all hide their thoughts." Lu Jingxian snorted disdainfully. "With them alone, if anyone dares to take the lead, this palace will teach them a harsh lesson." Cui Zhu quickly agreed and said, "With our empress here, even if we borrow 10 of their courage, they won't dare." Lu Jingxian smiled proudly and narrowed her eyes again. Amidst the discussions in the harem, Yin Qingxuan had already planted land in the space. "I still need points, and food is also money." This time she found that there was an additional option for automatic seeding in the space, which also required 10 points for redemption. Yin Qingxuan hesitated for a long time, gritted her teeth in the end, "Let's exchange it. Anyway, she matures quickly, and she's not short of these 10 points. The things sold in the mall are not expensive." After exchanging eggplant, chili, and watermelon seeds, there are still 69 points left, which is enough for her to spend a few days. 1 minute later, Yin Qingxian received a notification of successful seed sowing and couldn't help but marvel at the power of the system again. She then used Lingquan to water it, but this time there was no flourishing branches and leaves, only a small tender bud emerged. Yin Qingxian couldn't help feeling a bit depressed, as it seemed that the beginner's period had passed and the task began to become more difficult. Fortunately, sprouting is also a good thing, it's much faster than planting outside. After comforting myself, I went into the space and exchanged 2 bags of milk powder. Puppy Egg is a gold-swallowing beast that wakes up every day to eat. In just one day, a bag of milk powder has already been consumed by 1/3. When leaving the space, Yin Qingxuan brought out some cucumbers and tomatoes, and found that these vegetables were still the same as the newly planted ones, not wilting at all. It seemed that the space also had a fresh keeping function. I handed the vegetables to Yunkai and asked her to soak them in cold water. When it was hot at noon, she took them out and ate them. Before the watermelons were ripe, they were treated as fruits. Yunkai happily took it over, and at this moment, Mama Li also returned. Yin Qingxuan immediately asked, "How is it?" Li Mama nodded excitedly. They agreed to help us sell it, but the servant specifically instructed them to take it outside the palace. This thing is rare, and I believe it will be sold soon. Yin Qingxuan's heart immediately fell back into her stomach. As long as these 2 brothers are not foolish, they should know that this is a way to make money. That's okay, keep asking more questions these days. I know now. As soon as Li Mama finished speaking, Dog Egg burst into tears. Yunkai quickly ran in to make milk powder, while Li Mama picked up the puppy egg. Yin Qingxuan took a closer look and felt that the child looked much better than yesterday. He looked soft and plump, with a pair of fleshy little fists tightly clenched and a faint furrowed brow. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but extend her hand and pinched his round little face. Little Dog Egg stopped crying immediately, his little head swaying and turning around, his dark eyes fixed on Yin Qingxuan. Li Mama couldn't help but wonder, it said that children can only see things clearly in 7 days. It seems that our little prince can see people now. Really? Yin Qingxuan picked his small chin again. Little Dog Egg seemed to know that Yin Qingxuan was teasing him, so he suddenly opened his small mouth and chuckled. A pair of big black eyes were wide and round, as if set with 2 black gemstones, looking particularly energetic. Yin Qingxuan found the child more interesting and couldn't help but grab his small fist, gently shaking it. Puppy Egg immediately opened his little hand and grabbed Yin Qingxuan's finger, his mouth babbling, I don't know what he was saying. What are you saying? Do you want to eat Grandma? Yin Qingxuan wanted to pull out her finger, but the little Dog Egg tightly held onto it, and her little hand was surprisingly strong. TSK, is this also the effect of Lingquan? I don't know what the effect will be if I keep feeding my little dog eggs with Lingquan. Maybe when I grow up, I'll blow that bastard emperor with just one punch. Imagining the scene of her son beating me, Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but curl her lips and feel a surge of joy in her heart. Master, the milk powder has arrived. The young prince must be starving. Yunkai ran into the room with a bottle in hand, and Yin Qingxuan took it over to test the temperature with her eyelids. This is also what she and her sister Law learned. It is said that using this test temperature is particularly accurate, and I don't know if there is any scientific basis. Anyway, let's take care of Lu Huapiao. Puppy Egg's eyes lit up a bit when he saw the milk bottle. Before he could finish drinking a bottle of milk, he slept with his mouth open. Yin Qingxuan reached out to pull out the milk bottle, and his little mouth immediately moved again. Yin Qingxuan looked at the fun and stuffed it back in. Li Mama couldn't help but say, Empress, you can't tease the child like this. It will make your stomach wind. We don't have a doctor here. If the child gets sick, it will be too painful. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but be startled. It was better not to tease. Although there were medicines in the mall, most of them were taken by adults. She didn't know what medicine to give to a child like this. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Yin Qingxuan took a look at the space in the morning and found that the seedlings had just grown tall and had not yet bloomed. Looking at the 65 points on my hand again, I couldn't help feeling a bit sad, but I still ruthlessly exchanged a piece of meat. She is a carnivorous animal, unable to enjoy without meat. I just hope that those 2 brothers can exchange money, so that they can buy some meat from outside the palace. She will have to keep these points for something else. While pondering, I suddenly heard a loud bang outside, as if something had smashed in. Li Mama couldn't help feeling excited and said, "This is a signal that we have made an agreement with the Wang brothers. There must be some news coming." Chapter 8. Cannot let him be happy. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yin Qingxuan also followed to the door and hid to eavesdrop. Li Mama couldn't wait to ask, "Two brothers from the Wang family, have the things been sold?" Wang Dao couldn't contain his joy and said, "I've sold it." "Where did you get this thing from?" Li Mama said, "Don't worry about it. Hand in the money." With a grinding sound, the palace gate was pushed open and a silver package was handed over from the outside. Wang Erwu then said, "Li Mama, this thing sells well, but it's not as high as you always say. The 4 pieces sold for a total of 300 taels. Do you think it's okay?" Li Mama couldn't help but glance at Yin Qingxuan, who frowned slightly and nodded. Li Mama took the money and said, "Okay, next time you can sell more, after all, we can't even get this thing with a price." Wang Erwu chuckled. "Don't worry, if you have any more stock, I promise to do my best to sell it to you." Yin Qingxuan has already entered the room. 4 pieces and 300 taels are already quite a lot. In this era, 300 taels of silver is enough for an ordinary family to live for 5 or 6 years. But compared to her desire to leave the palace, it's really too few. Firstly, we need to prepare some clothes and also have waist tags. All the soldiers guarding the palace gate must be well prepared, and a few thousand taels is not enough. Furthermore, she also suspected that the Wang brothers had swallowed her money from it. Before she could speak, Li Mama said, "These 2 people are not good cakes. If they were to be sold in the palace, they would cost at least 600 or 700 taels of silver." Yin Qingxuan said quietly, "Well, I think they swallowed it. Who let us find no other way in the palace? With their humble identities, if they sell it in the palace, they will certainly cause people to investigate, and then they will sell us. Mammy Li, you can take the rest of the mirror and perfume and let them bring us 3 sets of eunuch's clothes and buy some meat next time you come." Mammy Li answered and went out with the rest of the mirror and perfume. 3 days later, the Wang brothers returned to deliver a message, removing their clothes and pork, and only bringing back 400 taels. Li Mama couldn't help but get angry. These 2 bastards are so bully that they have a good eye on us. This thing is worth at most 20 taels of silver. Yin Qingxuan sneered and said, "This is called a fallen phoenix better than a chicken." Yun Kai couldn't help but say, "Master, if we let them do it again, won't we get even less money next time?" Yin Qingxuan rolled her eyes. "What can we do? We can't go either." Yun Kai pointed to the dog hole and whispered, "Master, you forget that we can actually go out. We can contact the eunuch ourselves and ask them to help us sell. It will definitely be more than this money." Li Mama immediately objected, "No, it's too dangerous if someone asks us which palace we belong to and how we say it." Yun Kai held Li Mama's hand and said, "The Empress hasn't given birth yet. I heard from the imperial kitchen that there are many beautiful women in the palace. Let's just say one of them. We can't just give away all the silver for others." Yin Qingxuan also felt sorry for her points. This morning, she went to the space to take a look and saw that the seedlings had just hit the bone bud. At this speed, there were still a few days left until the harvest. She didn't dare to spend the rest recklessly and had to keep it to buy milk powder for the dog eggs. But if you go out and don't have a familiar palace maid, it's really too risky. After much thought, she could only take advantage of this dumbfounded loss first, and then teach these 2 bastards of the Wang family a good lesson when she leaves. After lunch, Yin Qingxuan went to the room to exchange 2 small mirrors and 2 bottles of pearl perfume, so Mammy Li gave them to the Wang brothers. Both of them were overjoyed when they received the goods. The first batch was sold to a jewelry store, with 150 taels of each sample. The second batch was entrusted to someone to sell to the mansion of the Lu University scholar, with a total of 1,000 taels. Seeing so many more goods coming, both of them's eyes suddenly lit up. Wang Dao whispered, "Brother, there really is you. This little thing has earned us hundreds of taels, but isn't it good for us to swallow their extra money?" Wang Erwu snorted and said, "What's wrong? That empress is locked in a cold palace and can't even leave. We have no worries. If one day we are transferred and have nowhere to make money, we can't make a good profit while they have goods now. Wang Dao thinks it's quite reasonable. Once you enter the cold palace, don't think about it in your lifetime. There's really nothing to be afraid of." Then he asked in confusion, "You said they were locked in a cold palace, where did this thing come from?" Wang Erwu said impatiently, "What's the matter with her? If you have money to earn, then you can do it." Yin Qingxuan also hated it to death. Although this thing didn't have many points, the points were not in vain. These two bastards must find a way to crack down on them. In the evening, Yin Qingxuan commanded Yun Kai to make a meal of braised pork belly. With sugar and soy sauce, the color and taste of the meal immediately improved several grades. Yun Kai couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of water. "Master, who did you learn from? How could you suddenly cook so many dishes?" "Of course it's an old immortal, try it or not." Yin Qingxuan reached out her chopsticks and picked up a piece of meat, then lifted her hand and it was picked up by a big mouth. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but feel both angry and amused. "You're a sharp beast. Every time you don't come to stir-fry, stewing meat is faster than anyone else's." Bai Shui has already swallowed the meat. His mouth was chattering, and his paws began to bow incessantly to Yin Qingxuan. Yin Qingxuan found a piece of fat and threw it to it, patting its brain and asking, "Xiao Bai, did your master get angry when I put on makeup for you?" Bai Shui's thoughts were all focused on the meat, and after finishing, she started thinking again. Her two hind legs kept jumping on the ground, wishing they could all jump into the pot. Yin Qingxuan threw another piece and said, "After finishing, I'll put on some makeup for you. I promise your master will be happy to see it." This time, Yin Qingxuan painted white snow as a giant panda and also painted a large area of black on her body. Bai Shui was very happy as she propped up a pair of panda eyes and twisted her buttocks to crawl out of the dog hole. Yun Kai endured for a while, but still smiled back and forth. "Master, you are so imaginative. If the emperor sees that he must be angry with you, he will cherish this dog very much when he is at the crown prince's mansion. He will feel heartbroken for a long time even if he loses a single hair." Yin Qingxuan patted her hands and said, "It's better to be angry with him. This kind of dog man can't make him too happy." As Yin Qingxuan spoke, Bai Shui had already run to the imperial study. Knight Jingyu was reviewing the memorial when he saw Bai Shui running in with two black circles under his eyes, his face suddenly changing. "Who is so bold as to blow your eyes like this?" The white snow had already pounced, and it was only then that Knight Jingyu could see that its eyes were covered in pot-bottom ash. Chapter 9. Are you sick? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Being reckless is really too reckless. Knight Jingyu threw the white snow onto the ground, then looked at his dark hands, and couldn't help but burst into flames with angry eyes. "Angry," he said, "who the hell ate the bear heart leopard gallbladder and dared to play such a trick on Bai Shui? Li Difu, you've been investigating for several days now. Who is the culprit?" Li Difu knelt down on the ground with a thud and trembled, saying, "I've almost asked everyone in the palace, and I've never heard of Master Bai Shui going to any palace. The new ladies have a heart to get close to Master Bai Shui, but Master Bai has a bad temper and they can't get close. Even Lady Xian's tent, Bai Shui, is not bought. I really don't know who dares to be so bold." Knight Jingyu squinted her phoenix eyes and cursed in a deep voice, "You're useless. You can't even figure out such a thing. From tomorrow on, you'll be following Snow White. If you can't figure it out, don't come back. Yes. Li Defu responded with a mournful expression and ran out to bring over Yi Jingyu's military uniform. Recently, when the emperor is in a bad mood, he will go to the Chongwu Hall, and many accompanying guards have hung up. Thinking that they had been beaten until their noses and faces were swollen, Li Defu couldn't help but sweat. As long as he didn't hit himself, he couldn't control beating others. He was an old bone that could withstand the emperor's fists and feet. As Li Defu howled, the culprit Yin Qingxuan was sitting in the yard, nibbling on cucumbers. A fragrant scent wafted out of her hand, and Yun Kai couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Yin Qingxuan glanced at her and said, "So many cucumbers, you and Mama Li can also eat them. Eating too much meat can also relieve the greasiness." Yun Kai quickly shook his head. "If the master likes it, leave it for him to eat. This is not a good thing. There are plenty of them on the old Immortal side. Go eat them and send one to Grandma Li as well." "Hey!" Yun Kai happily scooped out 2 cucumbers and ran back in no time. "Master, both Li Mama and the little prince are asleep," he whispered. Yin Qingxuan let out a sigh. Li Mama really worked hard taking care of the little dog egg. She had to urinate for a while and then eat again. In addition, she was getting older and her body couldn't resist it. "Then don't argue with her, let's eat together." Yun Kai nodded and happily sat next to Yin Qingxuan. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but ask, "Yun Kai, is this imperial palace very large?" Yun Kai nodded. "Of course it's big." Yin Qingxuan looked at the sky and asked, "So? What are the fun attractions in the palace? What is a scenic spot?" Yun Kai didn't quite understand. Yin Qingxuan patiently explained, "It's just a fun and beautiful place." Yun Kai tilted his head and thought for a moment. That should be the imperial garden. At this time, all the strange flowers and plants have bloomed, and it must be extremely beautiful. Yin Qingxuan held her breath in the cold palace for over a week, only able to see the palm-sized sky above her head, and her heart was not only a bit depressed. If you keep staying in this rundown place and don't wait for her to save enough money, you'll be depressed first. Can't help but ask, how far is the imperial garden from our cold palace? Yun Kai paused in surprise and said, "Master, you don't want to go out, do you?" Yin Qingxuan glanced inside and whispered, "It's already so late. Let's sneak out for a walk, shouldn't anyone notice." This. Yun Kai hesitated on his lips, but his gaze was filled with excitement. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but see her thoughts, so she grabbed Yun Kai's wrist and picked her up. He whispered, "Go take out the eunuch uniform, let's put it on and sneak out for a walk. Li Mama shouldn't wake up. The clouds are both excited and nervous. Master, can this work? It should be okay. If we don't go far, let's just go out and let's have some fun." After a moment, the master and servant crawled out of the dog hole. The two of them walked around the back wall, and a long street suddenly appeared in front of them. Looking at the wide alleyway, Yin Qingxuan felt that her breathing was much more relaxed. Looking back at the empty alley with no one around, my courage grew stronger and I slowly walked forward with the clouds. The master and servant looked around like Lu Lao Lao had entered the Grandview Garden, and the clouds were too tight. As they walked to the small forest ahead, their faces turned red and they said, "Master, I want to take a break." "Go ahead, I'll keep an eye on you." The clouds couldn't hold back any longer, so they ran into the forest. Yin Qingxuan crossed her waist and breathed in the vast air, feeling very beautiful. However, soon happiness turned into sorrow. Just as she was looking around, a patrol of guards walked over from the opposite side. Seeing Yin Qingxuan standing in the middle of the ground, he immediately shouted and asked, "Which palace are you from? What are you doing here most of the night?" Yin Qingxuan was startled, quickly lowered her head, and a name popped out of her head in an instant. "I am from Lixiu Palace." "Then hurry back. Yes. Yin Qingxuan turned around and walked back, and the leading soldier stopped her. Lixiu Palace is over here. Thank you, guard brother. I'm a bit disoriented in the dark sky. Yin Qingxuan gave a dry laugh and walked in the direction indicated by the guard. I had planned to take 2 steps and then turn back, but to her surprise, the team of guards had been following her all along. Yin Qingxuan had to grit her teeth and follow them, but after turning 2 corners, she was completely blinded. I wanted to ask those guards, only to realize that they had already gone far. Yin Qingxuan looked at these alleys with similar appearances and couldn't help but feel speechless. She had to quickly find them back. If Yun Kai couldn't see her, she would definitely be anxious. Just as I was about to ask someone, I suddenly saw a man carrying a long sword walking out of the nearby palace. He was wearing a black military uniform, similar to those guards just now. Yin Qingxuan quickly ran over and reached out to pat the man's shoulder. But he felt his wrist tighten and was already gripped by a large hand like an iron pliers. Before Yin Qingxuan could recover, he was thrown to the ground. Oh, my goodness. Yin Qingxuan was thrown upside down, and her hat on her head was crooked. She held back the pain and hurriedly put on her hat, looking unhappy as she said, "You're sick. I'm not an assassin, so I'll ask for directions. As for taking action. Oh, my waist." The man had already turned around and saw his appearance clearly. Yin Qingxuan's mouth suddenly opened into an O shape. Mom, how handsome. The man in front of me is around 20 years old, dressed in a black military uniform that complements his broad shoulders and narrow waist. He has a slender figure that, in modern times, is definitely a model's figure. His appearance is also quite handsome, with a high and straight nose bridge, thin lips, and a 3-dimensional facial contour that resembles a knife carving or an axe chisel. He squinted his cold and sparkling eyes at Yin Qingxuan, with a hint of the most popular sense of abstinence in his every move. What palace are you from, Reckless? A deep voice overflowed from her lips, instantly awakening Yin Qingxuan. Chapter 10. Finding a way out for yourself. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She rubbed her waist and got up, cleared her throat and said, "I'm from the Qionghua Pavilion. I just entered the palace a short time ago and accidentally got lost. Can you please ask the guard to give me directions?" When she arrived, she remembered passing by a place called Qionghua Pavilion, and walking straight along there was the cold palace. Guard elder brother. Knight Jingyu's eyes narrowed slightly, and his deep gaze rolled around Yin Qingxuan's face. In this palace, there are even servants who do not know themselves. It should be with those ladies. He turned to the west and said coldly, "Follow that road until you reach the end and turn right. Turn right again, and you will see the Qionghua Pavilion." Yin Qingxuan was very confused when she heard this. In modern times, she is a road-crazy person who can easily get lost by following the navigation. She couldn't help but apologize and say, "Guard, can you please give me a ride?" At night, Yu's gaze was slightly cold. This little eunuch is also taking too much advantage. Seeing his displeasure, Yin Qingxuan pursed her lips. Whispering softly, "If you don't deliver, then don't you. Why are you so fierce?" She rubbed her waist and said, "It's going that way, turn right, thank you." Yin Qingxuan was also unwilling to use her hot face to touch her cold buttocks. She suddenly turned around and twisted back to the waist that had just been thrown. I felt a sharp pain coming in waves, and my legs suddenly became weak, causing a flat fall. Yin Qingxuan was startled and quickly covered her face. As long as her face doesn't break, she can tolerate everything else. At the critical moment, one hand held onto her belt and lifted her up. Yin Qingxuan stood firm and awkwardly wanted to pick her feet. Feeling embarrassed and angry, he said, "Let go. If you break my waist, I will definitely have you compensate me next time we meet." After speaking, he pushed away Knight Jingyu and ran forward. Looking at Yin Qingxuan's panicked figure, Knight Jingyu curled her lips and dared to settle accounts with him. This young eunuch is truly a newborn calf and not afraid of tigers. However, after this commotion, Yi Jingyu's anger has been greatly relieved. He withdrew his long sword and walked back to the imperial study. At this moment, Yin Qingxuan ran all the way, turned right 2 times in a row, and finally found the small forest where the clouds were convenient. Clouds! Clouds! Shouted twice, but no one answered. It's estimated that the clouds have already returned. Yin Qingxuan glanced around and quickly climbed back to the dog hole. As soon as she entered the door, she heard a burst of crying, and Yin Qingxuan quickly walked in. What's wrong? Yun Kai was kneeling on the ground crying, with Li Mama standing beside her with a pale face. Seeing Yin Qingxuan, Yun Kai immediately turned around excitedly. Master, where did you go? You scared me to death. Yin Qingxuan patted Yun Kai's little head like a puppy and said calmly, Get up. I just saw you urinate, so I'll walk around. Don't cry, it's okay. Li Mama's face still didn't look good, and she knelt down with her tattered skirt. The old servant knew that the Empress wanted to go out, but he couldn't be so hasty. If someone found out, he would lose his head. Isn't the Empress always thinking of taking the little prince to find the old master? If something happens to you, who else can take the little prince out of the palace? Yin Qingxuan also felt a bit overwhelmed with pride. She let out a guilty cough and said, This is my fault. I promise I won't go out again in the future. You all get up. If we wake up the dog egg, neither of us will feel like sleeping. Yin Qingxuan didn't dare to look at Li Mama, and after speaking, she entered the room feeling guilty. Lying in bed, both her waist and buttocks were still painful. This was the second time she had been thrown over the shoulder, and the first time it was her cousin practicing judo. You can't take photos of people behind their backs in the future. Yin Qingxuan couldn't sleep, so she decided to enter the space and took a bath in a spiritual spring. After washing, she was indeed refreshed and felt comfortable everywhere. Returning to bed, I soon saw Duke Zhou. In a daze, Mama Li said angrily, These 2 dogs of the Wang family are paying less and less attention to us. 2 small mirrors and 2 bottles of perfume only give us 200 taels, which is a total of 50.1 pieces. Yin Qingxuan immediately sat up and realized that it was already dawn. Li Mama, what did those 2 dogs say? Li Mama quickly walked in and angrily said, It said that things are not easy to sell and can only be sold at a low price. Yin Qingxuan not only felt a little annoyed. These 2 bastards are becoming more and more greedy. If it doesn't work out, let's find someone else to sell them. Li Mama said with a bitter face, We can't get out of here at all. The only ones we can come into contact with are the 2 of them. Yin Qingxuan couldn't help but think of the guard from last night. Judging from his tone of voice, he must be an official and knows quite a few people. If he could help himself sell, it would be better than letting these 2 dog things make money. Those who enter the palace as servants are nothing but basic necessities. Who would be so foolish as not to earn money? He said, Yesterday I happened to meet a guard. Why don't I ask him? If it works, I'll find a way to get these 2 dogs to spit out the money they've swallowed us. Li Mama shook her head and said, No, it's too risky. Yin Qingxuan's face darkened and she said, Is there a better way for Grandma Li? Li Mama suddenly stopped talking. Yin Qingxuan walked up to Li Mama's side, and her voice softened a bit. Don't worry, who would have thought we came out of the cold palace? If anyone asks, I can just create a palace name. She paused for a moment and then said, Although this thing was given by the gods, it also comes with a price to pay. I can't let myself suffer and give them a fair price. Li Mama immediately raised her head and asked with concern, What price did Empress pay? You don't need to know about this. Yin Qingxuan said lightly and then said, This matter is settled. I'll go out and find him tonight. Li Mama saw that it was difficult to change her mind, so she said helplessly, "Madam, be careful. If someone finds out, everything will be over." Yin Qingxuan nodded and entered the space. The plants have not yet bloomed, but their points are constantly decreasing. She exchanged 2 small mirrors, 2 bottles of perfume and 2 tubes of lipstick. After the second shift, Yin Qingxuan changed into eunuch clothes and crawled out of the dog hole. To avoid more eye-catching, she didn't let the clouds follow her. She also carried a wolf-proof spray with points in her arms. If the bodyguard dares to report him, let him taste the power of high-tech. Following yesterday's memory, Yin Qingxuan finally found the Chongwu Hall after losing it twice. There were many figures in the room, and there seemed to be many people. There were also 2 guards wearing soft armor guarding the door. Look at this, it shouldn't be easy to enter. Just as she was thinking about asking the person in charge, she heard a deep and cold voice behind her saying, "Who is here to explore?"